Okay, we better get started since we're running behind, a little bit behind. But this morning, one of my tasks was to provide transportation for our three honored guests and to bring them from their hotel. Can't hear? To bring them from their hotel over here to the Commons. And I get over to the University Inn. I pack the three speakers into my Subaru Outback, and I think this has all the great makings of a joke. A Catholic who now attends a Methodist church is driving a rabbi, a Mennonite minister, and a Muslim imam from their hotel to a speaking engagement in Moscow, Idaho. I haven't figured out the punchline yet, but I think there's something that can be made of that. My name is Matt Moore. On behalf of the Borah Symposium Committee, it's my great pleasure to introduce Imam Hendy. That's as close as I can get, I think. Imam Hendy is the Muslim chaplain at Georgetown University. It's notable that Georgetown was the first Catholic university in the United States, and it's also the first Catholic university to hire a full-time Muslim chaplain, and that's Mr. Hendy. He's an imam of the Islamic Society of Frederick, and as the Muslim chaplain at the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. He also serves as the spokesperson of the Islamic Jurisprudence Council of North America, and it is in this capacity that he joins us here today to be a speaker. A prolific scholar and a sought-after speaker, Imam Hendy has presented a multitude of talks all over the world during the past 8 years. He was one of the first Muslim leaders who met with President Bush in the aftermath of September 11th and led the benediction at the 2004 Democratic National Convention. In May 2002, Hartford Seminary bestowed upon him the James Gedemy Significant Ministry Award for his dedication to his ministry and for his work to promote peace building between people of different religions. I give you Imam Hendy. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's my honor to be with you this morning. Well, don't be as surprised. A year ago, I was with a rabbi, a Methodist minister, and a Catholic priest driving between Rome and Assisi in Italy. And that was the best trip I ever took in my life. And we had to make peace. We had no choice. We could not kill each other on the way to Assisi. Also, I would say back in October, I was at the airport in Washington waiting for a rabbi to arrive from Miami, Florida. As he arrived, I'm giving him a hug. My phone goes off. I answer, and there was a rabbi from Los Angeles calling me. As I was speaking with the rabbi from Los Angeles, giving a hug to the rabbi from Miami, Florida, the phone also rings, and he is a rabbi from New York. God help me. Well, don't be surprised, because I do believe we have much more in common than we have differences. This is what I have come to believe from my own experience, traveling around the world, meeting with rabbis, with Jews, and with ministers and priests and clergy from the Christian faith and imams. I know I don't have much time, only about 3 hours. And Father, why are you smiling? Well, I'm sure you know the joke, of a cowboy once who went into a church down in Houston, Texas. And the minister was waiting for the people to come in. An hour and a half later, 2 hours, 3 hours, no one came in. So the minister said, "Son, would you like me to go ahead and start?" And the cowboy said, "Sir, if only one cow showed up, I would still feed it." So the minister started with his preaching, ended almost 2 hours later, looked at the cowboy and said, "Son, how was it?" And the man said, "Well, sir, if only one cow showed up, I wouldn't give it all the hay I had." So I'm going to be very brief. I'm not going to give you all the information I have, so that you have the reason to come back later tonight to be with us. The subject I'm speaking about is the role of interreligious engagement for world peace. This is a subject that is very dear to my heart because I lived as a Palestinian Arab Muslim under occupation. I saw hate from both sides. I saw rejection from both sides, each to the other. Bloodshed, alienation, something I did not like and did not feel comfortable with. Because as a Muslim, growing up a Muslim, my mother, who brought me to respect the Islamic scripture, the Quran, told me to reach out to the Jews, because 2/3 of the Quran is about the story of Moses and the Jewish people. You cannot be a Muslim unless and until you believe in Moses and his prophecy. Muslims celebrate Passover every year for 3 days by fasting. So this disconnect, inner conflict, was not something that was easy on me. And that's why I reached out to the Jewish community, to know the truth, to hear the authentic Jewish voice as to what they believe should happen with the conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. I also grew up seeing the West as the enemy, reading about the Crusades, reading about colonialism that claimed the lives of millions of Muslims, reading about the Inquisition that claimed the lives of not only Muslims, but also Jews, and also other than Catholic Christians. So that experience, if you will, was the driving force for my interest in studying other religions, especially Judaism and Christianity. So when I did my own studies in Islamic theology and Islamic law, I wanted to complete the circle of my life. So I went to a Christian Protestant seminary here in the States. And I lived for 3 years with Christian Protestant ministers or people who were studying to be ordained ministers. I had to write papers on the Bible like every other minister would or minister to be would. I had to write all kinds of papers on my favorite gospel, Dr. Luke gospel. I love Dr. Luke. Matthew, and the true image of Jesus Christ that I have come to learn from Matthew. And I may speak about that later today or in my presentation here. And I discovered what I call the new spirit of Christianity, the true spirit of Christianity. A faith that was preached by Jesus Christ, a faith that was intended to bring about peace to this world and nothing else but peace. Yet, when I did that, again, my life circle was not completed. I needed to do Judaism now, some justice. So for my PhD work, when I went to Temple University, my focus was on Judaism. I studied Hebrew. I had to read the Tanakh and go into the Mishnah and the Midrash and the halachic law and discover the similarities between Islam and Judaism. So Judaism became a partner for me. Since then, I have taken this as a moral duty, but also a task upon me, having discovered that we have much more in common, to help our communities come together, not to compromise the uniqueness each community has, but rather to find ways to walk the walk of peace, love, and compassion together. So if you feel some passion in my words, that's where I come from. I thought before I speak about the very subject that I am supposed to speak about, it's very important to introduce you to Islam in general, because I do believe from my experience working at Georgetown, but also traveling around the country, speaking on campuses, that there is very little knowledge of Islam that needs to be known to see where we can go from here. So I'll try to do justice to this subject and imagine having me trying to summarize 1400 years in an hour. It's like asking a rabbi to summarize 5,000 years in an hour, or 2 or 3, or even a week. Very briefly, when Muslims meet each other, they greet each other with Assalamu alaikum, very much like Shalom Aleichem in Hebrew, which means peace be with you. Very much like when Christians go to church on Sunday, and the minister or the priest says, peace be with you, and you also say, and also with you. Very much the way Muslims greet each other. They greet each other with peace, and they expect to greet other fellow human beings with peace as well. The word Islam means peace through submission to the Almighty Creator. To make this make sense to you, for those of you who know Hebrew, when you say shalom in Hebrew, the S and the L and the M sound mean what? Mean peace. The S and the L and the M sound in Arabic, and remember that both Arabic and Hebrew are sister languages, and there are many commonalities between them. And therefore the word Islam also means peace, but peace through submission to the will of the Creator who knows us best. Muslims, to be a Muslim, you need to submit to the Creator, God, our Creator, the Creator of us all. Monotheism is quite important in Islam. If anything, distinguishes Islam in the way it talks about anything, in the way it talks about monotheism. To be a Muslim, you need to believe in those things that you see on board or on the slide. Number one, in the existence of a Creator, God, the Arabic word for which is Allah. I know many people think that Allah or Allah is the Muslim Arab God and not the Christian or Jewish God. Well, that's not quite right. If you were to be listening to a rabbi speaking in Hebrew, like Baruch Hashem Adonai Elohino, Elohino, the A and the L and the He sound means our Lord, God, the A, the L, the He. The A, the L, and the He in Arabic also mean God. If you were to be reading the Arabic Christian Bible, you would come, as I have, you would come across the word Allah in the Arabic Christian Bible more than you would come across the word Allah in the Arabic Quran. If you were to be praying in a church, whether Catholic or Protestant or Mormon or Orthodox, you name it, you would hear the word Allah or Allah repeated by the minister or the priest as much, if not more than it is repeated by an imam. Allah or God is the transcendent Creator, the one who knows that which was, which is, and which will be, whose knowledge is absolute, and who is the Almighty One, the forgiving, the loving, and the source of peace as well. The King, the Malik, the King of all kings. Number two, angels. Muslims believe that this universe is not only about the human beings. We would like to think it is, huh? We would like to think that we are the center of the universe. We are not the center of the universe. We are just a very small component of this universe and what God created in it, very much like angels. The most honorable angel of all angels, according to Islam, is Jibril in Arabic. And he's the most honorable for two reasons. Number one, because he came down to Mary, the mother of Jesus, with the good news of her pregnancy. And number two, because he came down with the revelations of God to prophets and messengers. It was, according to Islam, Gabriel who came down with the Torah on Mount Sinai to Moses, and with the Injil, or the Gospel, or the good news to Jesus, and with the Psalms to David, and with the Quran to Muhammad. It was Gabriel, and therefore he is a very honorable angel in Islam. Prophets. Muslims believe that God commissioned the human beings from amongst us to speak to us, to guide us to the truth. Those prophets are sinless, the best of all humanity, amongst whom is Moses, a very important figure in Islamic prophecy, prophets, Joseph, Jonah, and so on and so forth. Many of those stories that you come across in the Bible, you do also come across in the Quran. I would say 95% from my own readings of the stories are the same. Recently I came home late in the evening and my wife said, "Yahya, so strange. I have never expected Hollywood to have a movie about Joseph and the story was derived from the Quran." I said, why would you say so? She said, "Well, come here, I videotaped it for you." As I was watching the movie again with her, I had the Bible with me. And I was reading the Bible with her. I said, "Oh, so the story of Joseph in Islam is very much the same, the story of Joseph in the Bible?" I said, "Yes, it is." We would like sometimes to claim that he is ours. Well, Jesus is only ours, the Christian. Or Moses is only ours, the Jews. Or Muhammad is only ours, the Muslims. But that's not what these prophets really wanted. They wanted to claim all of us with them. Holy books or scriptures. Islam believes that God revealed scriptures, as I mentioned earlier. And to be a Muslim, you have to believe that those scriptures were revealed. And therefore, to honor the scripture of Judaism and the scripture of Christianity is very important. In Islam, the slight difference is that Islam believes that some of those books were altered over the course of history, as many biblical scholars would also agree with me. The last thing is the day of judgment. Muslims believe that there is life after death. Life is not the end of it. Life is only a few years experience on earth, but we will be transformed into a different eternity. That will be an eternity, hopefully, of peace. Just going over these things, these are not really different from what a Jew would talk about or a Christian would talk about in essence. The little differences could exist and do exist. But the existence of God, the idea that there are angels around us, the stories of the prophets, scriptures, and life after judgment, in a way, is in the three traditions. Again, I don't have the time to go over all the slides. To be a Muslim, there are 5 rituals you need to practice. Number 1, what's called declaration of faith, like baptism in Christianity. This is like the passage, the rite of passage in Christianity, and bar mitzvah in Judaism. Shahada is to Islam. Number 2, to pray 5 times a day. Oh, man, this is too much. Why 5 times? 1 is enough a week. And 1 is too much even. We go to church only during Christmas, as Father Dean was talking to me yesterday. So, well, in early history of the church, Christians used to be required to pray at least 9 times a day. And even now, if you go to some countries in the East or in the Far East or Central Asia, there are still some Christian communities that pray 7 and 9 times a day. Again, the same thing in Judaism. The concept of morning prayer and evening prayer and afternoon prayer is also a part of the tradition of Judaism. Zakah is when you give a portion of your charity, of your money, of your savings or wealth to the poor in the 3 traditions. The idea of fasting or Lent in Christianity is also in the 3 traditions. The idea of pilgrimage also exists in different forms in the 3 traditions. Before I move further into this, when Muslims pray, they pray toward northeast here in the States, and that directs them toward Mecca, in a country known now as Saudi Arabia. By the way, Saudi Arabia is a very most recent name given to the Arabian Peninsula. Almost 70 years ago, it was never called Saudi Arabia. We direct ourselves toward Mecca because if you go back with your mind, with your memories to the Bible, to Genesis, Abraham was married to Sarah, who gave birth to, at one point later in her life, to Isaac. At one point, Abraham, according to Islam, was married to Hagar, but had a relationship with Hagar in a way or another, according to the Bible. However, it was Hagar who gave birth to whom? To Ishmael. And later, Abraham and his wife Hagar left the house to a far land. That far land, according to Islam, was the Arabian Peninsula. where Abraham built a house for the worship of God that has been in existence ever since then. And therefore, when Muslims direct themselves toward Mecca, it is because they want to remind themselves of who they are in relation to Abraham, in relation to this important figure in Christianity, in Judaism, but also in Christianity. In different ways, he is important. When Muslims pray, they kneel, they bow down. You see that also in the church in different ways. In the synagogue, you see that, the idea of bowing before the glory of God. We read from the scripture. One of the most important verses in the Quran that you have to read when you pray is Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, which means in Hebrew, which is also a very important verse, Baruch Hashem Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Very important verse in Judaism. And which means in English, praise and thanks be to God, the King of the day, the King of the universe. Imagine the very same verse that is important in the traditions, and you might start pulling your hair, saying, God, if we are so similar, what are we fighting about? Why are we so alienating of each other? Quite strange. The idea of fasting is also the same in the traditions. There's no time to go over some of these slides. According to Islam, recently I was at the University of Ghana, in Ghana, West Africa, and someone asked me, Imam, where are you from? And I said, I'm from dust. And this person said, well, where is that? I have not heard of a country called dust. Okay, well, Imam, don't tell me where you're from. What is your nationality? And I said, Dustian. Okay, what passport do you have? I said, I'm an American passport. Because I do believe, as the Bible teaches, as the Quran teaches, that from dust to dust, and that's what Islam teaches, that from dust we come, to dust we return. Life is a test and just a taste of what the life to come will be. Life is not expected to be perfect, and therefore we will face crises and difficulties and encounters that will challenge our faith. And the way we deal with those difficulties would reflect our relationship with God, the Creator, but also with ourselves and our traditions as well, including the crises that come about between the religious communities. You like those, huh? But don't ask me to sell you my cats. Life is not always bad, as many people would like to tell us. You turn on the Fox News and God knows what you see. You go to CNN, it's worse. You go to MSNBC, it's much worse. And you go back home saying, God, is there anything good going on right now in the world? Why? Because they would like to focus on the bad. They would not want you to focus on the good. For me, an event like this is an absolute good. The fact that we are coming together to learn about each other, but also to find ways to speak out for justice and goodness, is many of those events are going on around the world, but no one is focusing on them. Now, Islam, as I introduce myself to the subject, Islam's vision for the world starts from the concept of Tawheed, or the oneness of God. God is one. We are created in the image of the one and the light of the one. And therefore, we are expected to be one as well with each other, because we are created in the image of God. That exercise of trying to practice oneness in our humanity is called istikhlaf. And that istikhlaf has to be practiced on 3 levels, according to Islam. Number 1, tazkiyah, or to be spiritually strong. Number 2, islah, or to be morally sound. And number 3, umran, to be physically well-to-do. Islam does not focus only on the spiritual side of who we are as human beings, or the moral side, but also the physical side of who we are. So to be a good human being according to Islam, you need to be spiritually strong, morally sound, and physically well-to-do. And all have to go hand in hand. According to Islam, we do this umran, especially the umran, we do this islah, we do this tazkiyah with our fellow human beings. Both genders have to be a part of the process to bring about that goodness to the world. All religions have to work together to bring us to that goodness of the world. All ages have to be a part of the process. And all kinds, types, races, and skills have to also be mobilized to bring us all together in the direction of doing good in this humanity. Examples of what we can do together. Number one, to end the state of racial discrimination. There is racial discrimination here in the States, everywhere, and has been the case. It has improved a lot, and I'm very proud of those who have made that possible, such as Martin Luther King and many others. But there's also racial discrimination in other countries, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, in Central Asia, and you name it. Number two, to end those wars on territories. People are fighting each other, killing each other over territories. Who's going to have more of this or that land? Number three, end what I call expanding militarism. One of my favorite American theologians and clergy is Martin Luther King, who spoke about the three enemies that continue to hunt all of us. Number one, poverty. Number two, racism. And number three, militarism. These are the three enemies we need to work together to fight in different ways, shapes, and forms. And that's what we can do together to bring about that goodness to this world. Next, to end the mismanagement of our resources, human resources, financial resources, and skills. I was reading earlier a study about how 80% of water resources around the world are used by 11% of the human beings. I was reading about how 78% of the world wealth is controlled by 6 individuals. 6, imagine. I was reading about how in 48 countries around the world, people live with less than $1 a day. They tell you that there are no enough resources in the creation of God. I think there are, but we have mismanaged those resources because of ego and self-centeredness. And I think that is something we all need to engage together and work together to end poverty as well. Why do we need to do it together? Because we share God's love. God does not give air to Christians, but deprive Muslims from it. Maybe you have, I don't know. I have not heard of Christian Jewish air and Muslim air. I have not. God gave us all His love, blessings. We also share historical legacies, as you heard from me in my lecture earlier. We share theological similarities about God, about prophecies, about life after death. Last week I participated in a conference on the concept of dying well in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And there were rabbis and ministers and priests and myself. And it's quite amazing to hear all of those people speak about the dying well in the three religions. And at one point I took the microphone and I said, you did not need to invite me or the rabbi or the priest. The minister could have done it for all of us. Quite interesting. So we share all of that. We share even territories. America is the America of us all. Muslims are a part of the American fabric. Christians are a part of the American fabric. Jews are a part of the American fabric. We all share this land. We share the highways. We share the supermarkets together. If a bomb goes down or off on a highway here in the States, it's not going to kill only, maybe it's going to pick and choose. They have their own devices. Kill only the Muslim. I have never heard of that bomb yet. So we share the highways, we share this universe together. And that's why we need to work together and engage each other on those issues. And we need to work together because we have the same challenges. As I said earlier, poverty and economic issues and concerns. We share together social-political challenges like racism, wars, child abuse, domestic violence. You cannot believe, if I were to give you the numbers I have about how many women are sold to sex every day in Asia, in Central America, in South America. The trafficking of women around the world, women who are sold to sex from East Europe and Central Asia to the Middle East or here to America. You cannot believe that that is really happening. How many children are sold to sex and to the industrialized world, quote unquote, every day. Domestic violence is also a challenge that we all face and face together. I spoke about terror, militarism, HIV. You can never say, well, I am immune from it because it's happening only in Africa. People are traveling back and forth. People are engaging each other on a daily basis for all kinds of reasons. And therefore, none of us is immune from the danger of HIV virus. I spoke about sex industry, trafficking women, and religious extremism. There is a growing sense of religious extremism and movement within Judaism, within Christianity, and within Islam. And none of us can say, well, no, I don't have it in my faith, it's only in that faith. If you say that, I would like to remind you and myself of the biblical Jesus when he said, do not judge. Otherwise, you yourself will be judged. And the very measure you use to judge others will be measured against you. So we do have religious extremism. And to fight that religious extremism and that huge challenge, we need to work together and engage each other, because each one of us can contribute to that fight against religious literalist extremism. And because we cannot continue to use our religions to fight each other. So far, not so far, in different points in our histories, we used our religions to alienate others. Christians did that, Jews did that, and Muslims also did that. And when we come together, when we engage each other, we will be forced to overcome those separations and walls of separation that separate us or cause us to hate. I am the way and the truth that you read about in the Bible. Can that become a divisive theology, leading Christians to hate and alienate and reject Muslims or Jews or otherwise? The idea that Islam is Muslims believe that Islam is a divine faith that God revealed to Muhammad. Is that going to be used by Muslims to say, well, you know, only the Muslims will be saved, and those Jews and Christians have absolutely nothing to do with the grace of God, as I have heard from some Muslims? Or, well, we are the chosen people, you know. So forget about Muslims and Jews. If you are the chosen, from the chosen people, you will be saved, otherwise not. How can we confront those problematic texts in our traditions is quite very important, and a very important exercise to do together. Our religions do not teach hatred of those of other faiths, I believe, having read and studied the three traditions myself. The golden rule. Huh? Rabbi Hillel was once asked to summarize the Jewish tradition standing on one foot. Imagine. And he said, oh, that's very simple. Do not do to others what you do not like done to you. That's Judaism. Quite interesting. And you read, blessed are the peacemakers. If someone hits you on the right side, turn the left side, as you read in Christianity. In Islam, none of you truly believes till he wishes for his brother and sister what he wishes for himself. The very same golden rule. All of this should force us to engage each other. Next, the world needs us all like shipmates, to act as shipmates. What do I mean by that? The way I see this world, it's a ship. Anyone has ever been with the Navy? Okay, well, if you have not, maybe you need to go and visit a big ship with these different floors. They call them decks. For me, this planet Earth is like a ship. And each tradition has its own floor. And each floor has its own guide or captain. Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. Well, if the ship sinks, all those on it will sink without discrimination. And if the ship gets to its final destination, all those on the ship will get to their final destination together. And therefore, working as shipmates, concerned about each other's safety, reaching out to each other, planning together, is what this engagement is supposed to be about. The absolute truth is known only by God. I don't think that any Muslim can say, well, I believe 100% that Islam is the absolute truth, and therefore you Jews, if you don't believe in it, I'm going to discriminate against you and kill you. This is what we Muslims believe, that Islam is a religion of a truth. But can that be used to say other religions have absolutely no truthfulness to it? That's the challenge. We share experiences, like how do we fight domestic violence? We need to share experiences. Recently, I participated in a conference in Maryland, sponsored by local churches, synagogues, and mosques, only dealing with domestic violence, and bringing on board experts from the three traditions who deal with domestic violence. Why? Because we believed in Maryland that Jews have a lot to offer in terms of solutions, Christians have a lot to offer, and Muslims have a lot to offer. Let's exchange experiences and expertise so that we move toward eliminating domestic violence or child abuse in our own families. We all have a lot of experience to share. Skills. Doctors. I know that there are doctors around the world who do exchange programs. There are many programs that American doctors know of and practice every day that doctors in the Middle East don't know. Doctors in Africa don't know. Our ability to exchange those experiences are also important. Financial resources and exchanging them is also important. Now, I want to talk about two things. One is guidelines, and number two, where to go from here. Guidelines for interreligious dialogue and engagement. Very often I get the question, Imam Hindi, we have been trying, but we failed in that engagement. So what are the rules that I have come to learn from my own experience and engagements that you need to think about? Number one, interfaith dialogue means an exchange, not a disputation. We come sometimes to those engagement gatherings, but only to dispute someone else's faith, not to exchange ideas and faiths. Once you come into that kind of gathering with the idea, well, I'm going to prove to you Christians that you have absolutely no truthfulness to you, I will never go anywhere. And I have heard this from Christians who say, well, I'm going to go to that gathering only to prove to Muslims that they have absolutely no truthfulness to them, and the only way is Christianity. That will not take you anywhere. Number two, successful interreligious dialogue is measured in terms of, number one, increased understanding of the other. So at the end of the year, have you really increased your understanding of Judaism or Christianity or Islam? Number two, appreciation of difference, which leads to bridge building. Appreciation of difference, which leads to bridge building. Next, participants in interreligious dialogue are partners provided they are truly ready to dialogue and that they are equally, mutually partners. No one has the upper hand and no one has the lower hand, and no one is telling someone else, well, listen guys, I decide where to go from here and I decide on the agenda. When we come to the interreligious table of dialogue, we come in with on equal footing. Next, never apologize for what you think is authentic in your own tradition. Be polite about how you talk about it, but never apologize for it. Because many people don't like dialogue and engagement with someone else because they don't want to be apologetic. And no one wants you to be apologetic, but do it in a respectful fashion. Next, be quick to apologize and slow to take offense. How often do we do that? Quick to apologize and slow to take offense. And never be too arrogant to say, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I really love His Holiness the Pope, John Paul II, whom I met. And I believe that when he went to Jerusalem and apologized for the Jews, when he went to Damascus and apologized for the Muslims, when he went to Egypt and apologized for the Coptic Christian church, when he apologized for the Orthodox and for the Protestants, when he reached out to build the bridges, he spoke of a faith he was comfortable with, not apologetic about, but also he was so humble to say, he was so humble and humble enough to say, well, I'm sorry, we did wrong. Let's start a new direction from now on. That's what we need to do. In areas of conflict, raise your concern as a question rather than as an accusation or outrage. You Muslims, how dare you believe that Jesus is not God? You Jews are so hateful of Jesus that you don't believe that Jesus is even an important man, or is God himself, or the Redeemer. Imagine that language. Or saying, well, I heard that in Islam, Muslims believe that Jesus, who came to this universe from a virgin mother, a sinless prophet and teacher, but not as God or the Son of God. Why do you Muslims believe that way? See the difference in the approach of the same concern, and you will get the same answer, but the approach to that concern makes a huge difference. You lunatic, crazy Muslims, why did you do that on September 11? I'm sure you have heard that, huh? Enough to get you out of your mind. And they say, well, you know, why are these things happening? What do you think as a Muslim? Would you please educate me? That's a different approach. Examine your own self and judge it before you do so to others. In our histories, we have contributed to others' pain. We need to question ourselves before we question others, before we come to the table of dialogue. Be patient. Sometimes we come to those engagement gatherings thinking that the change, the conversion, if you will, the spiritual convergence should happen overnight. And I say no. It could take 20 years, 30 years. Be patient. Hearts will change. Minds will change. But be patient. Don't assume that you know everything about someone else's faith. Because I read a pamphlet of 3 pages about what Christianity is all about is not enough to tell you what the Christianity is all about. Depend on personal relationships. Take someone to a dinner. Take someone to a lunch. Engage someone on a personal level. That is the best to contribute to that engagement between the religious communities. Not only theological debates on what will or will not happen at the end of time, or eschatology. Those personal relationships are very important for that engagement. Humility is a virtue, and it will help. Tell the truth. Don't tell a lie when you come to the table of interreligious engagement. Don't belittle a smile. Don't be so rigid when you meet someone else because you think that they are not as saved as you are. Tell your story and do not be afraid. Yet do not offend someone else when you tell your story. I say very often to Jews, challenging the Jewish community, that the Jewish community has failed miserably to tell their story to Arabs and Muslims. The story of the Holocaust is sort of unheard of in the Arab and Muslim world. Yes, I do blame Muslims and Arabs for not knowing it, but I also blame Jews because they also failed to reach out and tell their story. The same thing with Americans and their ability to reach out to other cultures and other countries. Well, how can we do that? I don't like to talk about politics, but you know that our president has just cut down on the budget of our State Department, $56 billion, and gave it to the DOD. So public diplomacy is no more there. God help us to tell the story of America and the greatest story of America. The story of religious pluralism in America. Immediately after September 11, I participated in an interfaith service in Southern Maryland. And this was this old lady who came to me, gave me a hug and said, Imam, thanks be to the Lord for September 11. Wow, wait a minute. No way. She said, well, just be patient. She said, a Methodist, have always been a Methodist, have always been in this town, never prayed next to a Catholic, let alone next to a Muslim. September 11 made me do that before I die. Interesting how she saw the story of September 11, how it became something not good, but something that was mobilized to talk about our good story of America, how we do business together, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and how we succeeded in many cases in doing so. 25. I'll finish in 7 minutes. I told you about that Baptist minister, so I'm going to give you all the hay I have now. Listen to the others people's stories, and do not undermine it. Don't undermine the story of a Palestinian boy who tells you about his plight and his pain. Don't undermine the story of a Christian who lives in Pakistan and whose church was bombed by Muslims. Don't undermine the story of a Jew who is afraid to go to a synagogue in Morocco because the synagogue was bombed by Muslims. Don't undermine the story of a Muslim who does not and cannot go to a mosque in Greenville, South Carolina, because his mosque was attacked by the local group of a Christian faith. Don't undermine that story. Listen to it. Be passionate about it. And capitalize on it to bring about the best for the engagement. Things we can do together, and I have been a part of from my own experience, create social harmony programs, such as what we call in Maryland and Virginia open neighborhood houses, where we hospitality neighborhoods. And what happens in those streets? A Jewish family, a Christian family, and a Muslim family get together every month and provide food for everyone on that street, and invite people in the entire neighborhood, not only on that street, to come and share food. And they ask the police department or law enforcement agencies to block the roads so that kids are playing together, people are really engaged together. So beautiful to engage communities together, women together, children together. Number 2, generate goodwill amongst people and an interest in the engagement of interreligious work. Organize TV and radio programs together, as I have seen throughout the country, where the local synagogue, the local church, and the local mosque put together a TV program, weekly TV program. And 1 week it's hosted by a rabbi, the next week it's hosted by a priest or a minister, and the week after that it's hosted by an imam. Quite interesting. Sponsor projects together, such as shelters, open houses, cleanups. In Maryland, this last year in August, we raised $600,000, from which we built 3 houses for 3 poor families in Washington, D.C. The money was raised by local synagogues, churches, and mosques. Quite interesting. At Georgetown University, because there's an image out there that Jews and Muslims are so much apart, we put Muslims and Jews together, and we asked 5 Jewish students to 10 to wear the Star of David shirts, and Muslims to wear the crescent shirts, and go to a local soup kitchen and feed the hungry and the poor together, and ask them to walk throughout the blocks of Washington, D.C. together, engaging each other. Quite interesting. Engage your youth in those activities. After all, I believe that the children of today are the leaders of tomorrow. The youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow. Our rabbis, priests, ministers, and imams have failed us. It's about time that we instill in our children the love to reach out and to engage. That is about the future of tomorrow. Participate together in special activities, such as for Martin Luther King Day, Passover. I have participated in Passovers led by a rabbi, a minister, or a priest, or an imam. I have spoken at Rosh Hashanah services many times, and in Hebrew. And imagine the surprise out there to have an imam, an American imam from a Palestinian Arab background, speak in Hebrew in a Rosh Hashanah service. Imagine the kind of love that flows there within the gathering. The tears that I have seen, the hugs I have experienced, quite amazing. You know, to have a Passover also sponsored by a local church, not the synagogue, quite interesting. Eid, or a Muslim holiday, if it can be sponsored by a church. And it has happened in Maryland where I live. The local Lutheran church sponsored 3 nights for the break of the fast meal in Ramadan at the church. They prepared the food, they did from the A to Z planning. Muslims just went in to break the fast and to pray in the church. Quite interesting. Things we can do together like these 2 cats can. It brings clergymen and women together. It brings educators together. I have participated in many conferences where educators from the Muslim world exchange programs with educators from the U.S. Professors from the U.S. going to the Arab world, to the Muslim world. Jews, Christians, and Muslims going back and forth, engaging each other as educators, as teachers, as professors. It brings journalists together. I think journalists have a lot to do with the bad state we are in. I hope we don't have any journalists here. No offense. Sorry. Well, I love you guys, but sometimes you mess up. So, sorry. It brings humanitarian institutions together. You know what happened after tsunami? When Jewish groups worked with the Christian groups, worked with Muslim groups. Quite interesting. In Darfur, west of Sudan, the Catholic Relief Agency, working with Jewish humanitarian groups and Muslim humanitarian groups, working together in the field, working together, regardless of their religious background. They're working together to feed the poor, to take care of the naked. It brings doctors together, because also doctors can help that engagement. Well, you fear that which you do not know. And therefore, let us learn about each other and work together with each other. Then you will see the energy and the peace you have always hoped for and wanted. And I mean by that, world peace and personal peace will be a reality. If you want to be in touch with me, this is my email. Thank you very much. Thank you. I understand there are almost 15 minutes questions and answers.
There are some questions from the crowd.
Yes, yes sir, in the back.
Thank you for coming. And I can't help but, you don't want to get into politics, but I think some of us do. All of what you have said touches on our political lives. I don't think there's anything religious that's not political.
Yeah.
And I realize this is really very inappropriate or incorrect to say that your portrayal of the Pope, I simply speak for a whole lot of people in Latin America. That's not their memory of this Pope. Systematic marginalization of all of the sort of people that you've described in your presentation. So I simply had to mention that, and you might want to comment. I don't really have a question. I guess my one observation is, and what truly I pray about this as a sort of secular person, is that I would hope that you could maybe sit down with people in your immediate environment down there in Washington, D.C. and give them this sort of a presentation. I'll never cease to be amazed at, I came from the East Coast to this frontier town. I thought it was the other side of the planet, and it was like higher spirits brought me here. I'll never cease to be amazed by the strength and the goodness of the people at the grassroots. Something, however, is separating us, or is such a disconnect from what the strength I see here and what comes out of Washington. What you've described here on so many panels is the antithesis of what this regime has been doing around the world. To talk about, us coming together and then at the same time have a regime in place that is militarizing the planet. I simply encourage you at Georgetown University. You are an influential person, and you're traveling the world. I hope right back in Washington, D.C., that in some way you can get this presentation to those people, because there's an alienated populace out here, and our voice isn't being heard, and when it's heard, interview with somebody representing this U.S. regime, and they said basically, you know, what we're doing is very religious, and if you disagree with us, that's not our problem, because we're going to create a new reality, and it's up to you as a journalist to figure out what that is. And once you even get a handle on it, we're going to be moving on to new ideas. So this idea, I guess my last comment is of the again, systematic use of religion for political manipulation is something that, you know, I really hope, I feel it's really your responsibility, one of many, particularly at the heart of the empire, to be talking about this. Thanks. Thank you for listening.
I share your sentiments. I share your feelings 100%. In regard with the Pope, I do not like to judge. I like to build on the positive elements in the character of every human being. I do have things to disagree with the Catholic Church on, socially and politically. I have things to disagree with with the Pope himself, and I met him and I told him about the things I disagreed with him on, and I keep them between me and him and the Lord. However, it's not, I think, fair to say that the Holy Father or the Pope was the outcast, terrible man. I think he did many things that many other popes were not able already to do. The Pope started what I call the 1 million miles journey. He was not able to help us cross the island through his leadership, but he started that journey where he forced Catholics to come up with a new theology in relation to the other, where he started a trip that I hope we could continue and build on. This is where I come from. I like to focus on the positive aspects of people's religions, traditions, cultures, and personalities. And I think many things were so good about this Pope. That does not say everything was perfect in him, because according to Islam, as you heard me, perfection belongs to the Lord, to God himself. Every other than God, and the Pope is other than God, is imperfect. And therefore, we can find flaws in him, but we can find flaws in many of us as well. I do sit with those politicians, and I am as clear about my message of hope and love and compassion that I hope our politicians take seriously as I was with you, maybe even more. I challenged President Bush a few times. I don't know if he likes me anymore, and it's not a big deal for me. If the Lord loves me, that's enough for me. But I was speaking to some of our colleagues here about an experience I had with the president himself, where he was so feeling so proud to be Christian, and he referred to the Bible in that meeting a few times as to prepare the audience of almost 13 individuals for why he was going to the war in Iraq. So the Bible had the basis for him, and it was the Bible that called upon him to go to that war in Iraq. And when my turn came to speak, I said, Mr. President, well, thank you for your wonderful speech. I am also familiar with Christianity and the Bible enough to know that you have overlooked, blessed are the peacemakers. You have overlooked the Bible where it says, you were told an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And I here tell you, love your enemies and pray for your persecutors. I told him, President Bush, if you want to change the world and protect America, you protect it with the unwaverable, unchangeable, unconditional love Jesus showed even to sinners. And his answer was, Imam, you know that I am also a realist. Interesting. I told him, are you a Christian or a realist? I want to know. So I did challenge him a few times, and I'm not afraid of saying so. And I think we need to challenge all of our politicians. Those senators who go from here to Washington, we need to challenge them. We need to challenge our congressmen and women. We need to challenge the clergymen and women who accepted such a behavior from our governments, or who accepted to be used, as you said, by politicians for their own political agenda. Though sometimes I wonder who is using whom. Are some of our religious institutions using the government for their own religious, extremist, literalist alienating religious agenda, or is the government also using those religious institutions for their own political agenda? I think both is happening. And we need to reject any misbehavior on behalf of the government and abuse, but also on behalf of religious institutions that have become a part of that system. In terms of the strength of the grassroots, I have been calling upon what I would call an international movement of a true, genuine love for peace, where we all can come together, engage each other for a better future for all of us. And I think I have enough hope to say that has begun. Many of those marches that you have seen in Washington, D.C. and around the country, in Europe, in the Middle East, where people have one voice for peace and only for peace, is quite interesting. The Quaker community, the Mormon, many other churches that have done exceptional work for peace is quite a source of optimism for me. However, the challenge is, can we make this enthusiasm in the grassroots community become a movement that can empower and change the world? That is the challenge. So instead of blaming only the politicians, can we also blame ourselves? Because I think the change starts from us within our own local communities, on our streets. Can we all become one, within one neighborhood, within one town, within one state? And can we reach out to other states? And can this become a movement around the world? That is also a part of the challenge. Educators, as I said, reach out to educators, to clergymen and women. I am about to establish, and you are about to hear about the establishment of an international organization called Clergy Beyond Borders. The idea of Clergy Beyond Borders is to bring clergy together, to become the source of that hope that you spoke about, to be able to lead the people with enthusiasm, love, and compassion for the world, rather than becoming a part of political agendas for politicians. The last thing about your question, I would say, and I told this to many politicians, one of my favorites is Abraham Lincoln's statement, who said, "I do need to eradicate my enemies, but I eradicate my enemies only by making them friends and not making wars with them." Yes? Any other question? Yes, in the back.
This morning, a new pope was elected, and commentators said that he had spoken out against relativism, and one of the things that he spoke out against was that the idea that all religions have some element of truth, and he said that this is not so. And I'm wondering, if you could speak to this new pope, what would you tell him?
Well, I am not in charge of the Catholic Church, as you know. I would hope that he, not she, he, so far there is no she, that he would continue on the path that I believe the previous Pope started, building a good, positive relationships with people of other faiths. That's number one. Number two, you can believe as much as you want about the absoluteness of your faith, but that belief must not cause you to dehumanize, alienate, or bring down others' feeling about their own authenticity and the authenticity of their own faiths. Number three, I would tell him, rather than speaking about theology and who is authentic or not with God, let us work on social justice together. One of my favorite passages in the Bible is Matthew 25:30-46. You know that passage, I'm sure, where Jesus Christ spoke positively about those who clothed the naked and fed the hungry. If the Catholic Church is really interested in promoting Christian values, then they have to do it with others and to eliminate poverty and militarism around the world. That is what I hope he stands for. The last thing is, speaking in defense of women that have so far in a way, suffered within the religious community in terms of being able to become priests and promoted within the hierarchy of the church, for me, is a very important thing that I hope the Catholic Church focuses on. However, this is not really my own politics. This is not my own business. But if I want to have a frank discussion, I would have hoped that women will start within the Catholic hierarchy having more advanced positions. Yes?
I wonder if you could mention some other organizations besides your new clergy Beyond Borders, if you think enable people to work together. I have in mind, for instance, the Interfaith Alliance, or I'm sure there are others. What do you think are the organizations that help us?
There are many local organizations that I know of around the country that do local work. There's a national organization called U.S. Initiative for Peace in the Middle East. And it is made of high-ranking officers within the Catholic Church, the Protestant community, the Jewish community, and the Muslim community. And its main concern is to rally their own folks within the states, but also in Europe, to push for a peaceful negotiation between Arabs and Israelis and a peaceful end to the conflict. And I have been a part of this institution as well. So there are many groups that I know, like in the Arab world recently, a new organization was founded in Jordan called Peaceful World, Together We Will Walk. A very important organization run by an Orthodox priest within Jordan in the Middle East, but reaching out to Europe and America, is another organization I know of. So there are many. Yes? Any final, maybe, question? Yes, sir.
I wonder if you could address the issue of the several million people in the world who are, many of them are deeply religious, but not who believe in one God, like
that maybe it might go back to the idea of relativism. What is the definition of religion? What's the definition of religiosity and religious and spiritual and spirituality? I think unless we are able to define those terms, we will go nowhere and we will continue to alienate each other. My concept, my personal concept of religiosity and religious, if you are a human being whose action speaks of his love for his or her fellow human beings, you are a religious person. So if your actions speak of your love for your human beings, you are a man of religious convictions. And with that term, as I see it, I think many of us are religious. And I leave the rest to God to judge our theology. Thank you. Thank you.